Peter, you've been focusing a lot and thinking a lot around the innovation space at the moment, and this whole paradox, I guess, that companies are facing, where they realise that they need to get into the innovation space, but they are feeling very challenged in the way in which they do that. When you think about some of these exemplars like Apple and Google, what are they doing that perhaps others should be focusing on to learn those key lessons that they have determined as obviously being very much part of their success factors right now?
Sure. Well, I think one of the big differences is they don't view innovation as an outside activity or an add-on activity, and they don't view it as a project. It's core to their operating model. It's the reason they exist, right? So I think you get organizations like innovation and Google and Apple, who believe that it's innovate or die, and it's the nature of doing business. We're all there to create value for our customers and stakeholders, and we have to keep doing that. So to me, it is the core of their operating model. And where you find challenges when you think that innovation is an add-on function, either to be managed as a separate function or as an addition to the normal activity of business. It's not an addition to the normal activity of business, it is business. So I think that's what you'll find in organisations like that.
The difficulty is that they're up against the startups, of course, who can start with a culture of innovation from day one, and larger organisations are trying to embrace innovation, but not too sure, who drives that process. Is that part of the problem that you've got here? Is it almost like a two-tier market? Well,
you look at what drives startups, and startups are there because they've found an overlooked or underserved need or aspiration in a market. Right? I mean, people buy products for one of two reasons. They buy them to solve a problem or remove pain, or to pursue pleasure, to fulfill some kind of unfulfilled aspiration. And what allows startups to emerge is they can identify those opportunities, but they're also not encumbered by particular investments in past technologies or past assets or past core competencies. So they can approach it from a completely clean slate. And they can build the capabilities that are necessary, and they can go pursue those opportunities without any encumbrances. So I think most organisations, most incumbents, most established businesses need to tackle both of those problems. One is to fundamentally rethink what customer problems and aspirations they're trying to meet and address. And there's always unfulfilled problems and aspirations of customers. And that goes to the core of things like segmentation. How have we segmented the market? Which customers are we targeting? What needs do we think we're addressing? And once those things get entrenched, it's really hard to rethink them. So the first part is stand back. Which customers are we targeting? How have we segmented the market? Where are the unfulfilled problems and aspirations that we could go after to keep the startups out? Second thing is, what are the competencies we've built to do that? What are the products we're building, the assets we have, the skills we have, the capabilities we have, and are they still relevant? And of course, core competencies live longer than products, but they don't live forever.
In your presentation at the CIO Summit, you talked about the red line and the blue line. Just talk us through that methodology and the challenges that companies have about switching lines effectively.
Yeah, the lines refer to the rate at which an organisation is improving its performance and creating value for customers. And the red line is called the red line because that's the dangerous one. The dangerous line is too much sustaining innovation, incremental innovation, trying to continuously improve what already exists. Now, we need to do that. Every company needs to continuously improve. But at some point, if you do too much continuous improvement and you're not looking for the entirely new ways of creating value for your customers, it becomes a danger to your organisation, and you can have companies like Kodak who become completely irrelevant because somebody else found a new way of creating value. The blue line is reference to reframing or disruptive innovation. The nature of reframing or disruptive innovation is it's an attempt to create value for customers in ways that weren't possible before. The problem with it is, as it starts out, it always looks inferior to the old way of doing business. So Kodak had a digital camera. It only had 1 megapixel of resolution. They showed it to professional photographers, and professional photographers said that's inferior. So why would you build that? The problem with the blue line is it's going to improve at a much faster rate than your traditional business, and at some point it can take over, which is what it's done with digital photography. It's done it with voice over internet protocol telephone calling compared to traditional fixed networks. It's about to do it with digital wallets, which will replace ATMs so that we no longer need to go to the ATM again. But once a bank has got a big investment in a massive ATM network, it doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know how much to sink into digital wallets versus protecting the ATM network, and because of that it falls into a dilemma, and once it falls into that dilemma it gets confused and paralyzed and is slow to react.
Given the fact that disruption is almost an accepted part of business these days, has that also shifted the risk paradigm as well?
As we said in the conference today, risk is a double-edged sword. The risk in doing something disruptive or reframing is a lot of uncertainty. We're never certain about the way the future market's going to evolve, the way customers are going to evolve, the way technology is going to evolve. So a lot of managers believe that is the key risk to manage, and therefore they stay away from disruptive. The lessons learned, however, are that if you stay with certainty and you stay with things you know and assets you understand and business models and frameworks you understand, ultimately the risk is you become irrelevant. You just leave the door open for someone else to do the disruptive innovation, probably a startup. Today at Microsoft, for example, public enemy number one is Google. And they never would have predicted that that would be their number one enemy. That's because Google introduced the importance of search as part of a computing experience. And it was not something that Microsoft was even thinking about. They now understand it, they now know it, they're trying to reverse engineer it, but of course the follower always has a hard time reverse engineering, right? The assumption is that you can learn what the first mover did, you can reverse engineer it, you can make something better, and you can catch up. That's not proving to be true for somebody like Microsoft in everything from search to mobile telephony to data to cloud. And so that's the ultimate risk. There's risk in everything. There's risk in not being disruptive. So just substituting one set of risks for another, and a good risk management strategy says you will have a portfolio. You'll have a portfolio of disruptive things you're trying, and you'll have a portfolio of sustaining things you're improving. The trick is to not let the sustaining model prevent you from playing to win with the disruptive stuff.
So if we think of companies like Apple, of course, and you've spent a lot of time looking at the Apple model, have they got as close as we think it's possible to perfect this pipeline of innovation?
Apple does have a model. They have a model of innovation, and it's to create value in multiple ways, so that if somebody comes after them in one dimension, there's still 2 or 3 other dimensions that that they have to address before they can actually overtake somebody like Apple. The Apple model is fairly simple. It's the right combination of sustaining and reframing innovation together. Sustaining being, let's improve what other people are doing. So for example, they make a piece of hardware. But the other thing about their model is they have a very deep-rooted commitment to being unique. All right? To be effective with a customer, you have to be relevant to them, addressing the needs and aspirations they have, but you also have to do it in a unique way that generates advocates and proactive supporters of your organization. So being unique is just as important as being relevant. And Apple understands that perhaps better than anybody. So when they do innovation, it has to pass very strict tests that set it apart from everybody else. So they'll make a piece of hardware, but that hardware is unique because of its industrial design and its user interface. Then they'll come to the other side of the innovation portfolio and they'll do something reframing, which is they'll solve a problem that previously wasn't solved, or they'll let people fulfill an aspiration in ways that were not possible before. So when they made their iPod, they solved the problem of accessing and organizing the content in a legal way. They created the iTunes store. When they put out the smartphone, they provided you the choice of 300,000, 400,000 applications that let you do that, let that device do what you want it to do. and customize it and make it relevant to you. Then they had a retail experience, which is the Apple Store, and that in itself was reframing. There's lots of electronics retailers, but the experience in the Apple Store is fundamentally unique, and it's where you go to learn the future of computing. And even their brand. Their brand represents cool, sleek, modern, innovation, different, and people can replay those words to you no matter where you go, anywhere in the world. So when you bundle everything together, they have a fairly predictable formula that says we'll do something sustaining, we'll do something reframing, we'll wrap it together in a very consistent brand, and we'll keep doing that. And every 3 to 5 years, we'll launch a new platform or a way of creating value. So great companies rise and fall. I don't think we're anywhere near the beginning of the fall of companies like Apple, because their understanding of how innovation works and how to create it is probably much deeper rooted than most other organizations.
The other advantage that they've had, and you've had a look at this, is this ability to lock in the customer base, to make the customers so aligned to the product that they wouldn't ever think of necessarily going outside of that Apple paradigm. I mean, that obviously gives them a significant advantage too, doesn't it?
Yeah, you look at, you call it lock-in, and that's a very interesting term. What they have is happy prisoners, right? They have prisoners, they have customers who are happy to be locked into Apple. And if you find the true Apple advocate, they're a disciple. Now, how did they do that? They did that by creating value for somebody that was relevant and unique, right? And that's how you always create happy prisoners. You're addressing critical needs of customers and aspirations of customers in a way that nobody else can do. You contrast that to telcos in the mobile space, who also use the term lock-in, but their way of thinking about that is locking you in with a contract. You have to buy my 2-year contract to get a free phone or to get a subsidized phone. And that's what we call the unhappy prisoner model. And what you'll see is at the end of that 2-year contract, the customer will look around for the next best deal on a phone, and they're shopping around essentially for commodity telephone service, and the only way those companies can keep their customers is through contractual arrangements. This is not what we call innovation. It's called the unhappy prisoner model.
One of the big buzz concepts within management these days is this idea of co-creation of value, that two parties can create value for each other, whether that's within the organisation or external between an organisation and its customers. If you then sync co-creation of value with innovation, that is the kind of space that businesses need to be thinking about more, isn't it?
Yeah, the simple premise here is that nobody has a monopoly on innovation, right? Even the best organization in the world, including Apple and Google, they do not have a monopoly on innovation. Nobody can attract all the best minds in the world or develop all the best innovation processes in the world. So if you accept that innovation could lie anywhere, what you want to do is you want to create an open innovation network, which is integrating your own smart people with people outside your organization who can either help you solve a problem or see an opportunity that you couldn't see before. So we have companies like Mozilla that creates Firefox, the alternative browser. They have a community of 8,000 volunteers that are continually helping Mozilla to improve the product and see new opportunities that they couldn't see otherwise. You have a company like Procter & Gamble, a consumer products company. They have 7,000 R&D scientists around the world. They realize that for every scientist they have, there's potentially 200 other additional innovators out there somewhere who could help them improve their business. So they actually identified a network of 1.4 million potential innovators that is now their open innovation network. And that open innovation network has radically reduced the time to market for new products and the flow of new ideas into their business. So the notion that one company can do it all by themselves is now foregone. We have co-creation models, we have crowdsourcing on the web of product ideas, prioritization of product ideas. We have web-based crowdfunding models to fund new ideas, so the whole notion that capital is unavailable is no longer a relevant argument. We're seeing startups being funded overnight on crowdfunding models and bringing their ideas to market in ways that we never thought were possible before.
And at Berkeley, where you're based, I mean, your students obviously will be embracing this because this is the language of their generation. And yet, when you consult to larger, more established companies, how much are they feeling overwhelmed by all of this change around them?
Yeah, well, the trick is to create an environment of entrepreneurship, right? The entrepreneurs are out there outside your organization creating opportunities and businesses, and we need to foster the culture of entrepreneurship inside the organization. And really that's having the catalyst to drive the innovation internally. It's really having a clear vision about how you would like your organization to transform in the future. So what do we want to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now? And freeing up the innovation that naturally exists inside your organization, right? And that's really creating a culture where we're willing to challenge the assumptions and willing to challenge the status quo. It's a culture that does not penalise risk-taking, that in fact embraces risk-taking, but tries to manage the risk through rapid experimentation, learning through failure, and moving on once you learn where your mistakes are. So we see lots of large organisations trying to build an innovation culture, and that's the most important thing to do. It's not a process that's going to drive this internal innovation. It's the culture and the willingness to experiment and the willingness to take risk and not penalise risk.
And when we think of this continuum that we're on at the moment, and the way this is changing, as you say, you've got organisations having to think almost as being entrepreneurs within the space in which they operate. How much is this challenging the established paradigms of management thinking that is having to sort of reinvent new approaches to this new environment that I guess we're moving into?
Yeah, well, there's lots of inhibiting assumptions associated with successful organisations. And in fact, the more successful the organisation is, the harder it is to actually instill this culture of innovation. And that's for one very simple reason. The more successful you are, the less willingness you are to challenge any of the assumptions. And what you want to do is sustain your existing business model. And so the kind of innovation that gets done is very limiting.
And you used the example of BlackBerry, for instance.
BlackBerry is a classic case. BlackBerry was once the leader in smartphone space. It had a very relevant product, which was one that allowed enterprises to do secure email. And that entire space of smartphones has been disrupted and reframed. That is not the purpose of a smartphone today. The purpose of a smartphone is to allow us to do lots and lots of different things. So as BlackBerry struggled to innovate in that changing world, they certainly asked their own internal people to do a lot of creative thinking about what was possible, but at the same time they encumbered their staff by imposing a very limiting restriction on their innovation. And the limiting restriction was that BlackBerry felt you needed to leverage their key asset. Their key asset was the captive BlackBerry server network that allowed them to send secure emails around the world. And that became a condition for any kind of innovation that the team would come up with. And of course, that condition became a limiting factor. And today you see BlackBerry struggling for relevance and struggling to try and catch up to the way the smartphone market has been moving.
And just finally, if we think about, I guess putting you're looking into your crystal ball about where this might all be taking to us, would you be game enough to make any predictions about where we might be heading to in the next phase of this emerging change?
Well, I think you're seeing the beginnings of a trend that I've certainly predicted for a very long time, which is the shift to being more effective with customers instead of trying to be more efficient as an organisation, and realising that in order to be effective, we need to have really detailed information about individual customers and individual contexts of individual customers. So if you think about what's going to happen in spaces like healthcare, for example, the healthcare industry is evolving to one of mass customization. Right? If we can map somebody's DNA, we can then design drugs that target specific markers in somebody's genetic map. And the whole shift towards customized segments of one. We've been talking about this for a very long time. But now we're beginning to realise that with all of the data out there, that this is possible to customise everything from drugs to individual customer experience. And so that's placing a lot of emphasis, not so much on the traditional hardware and software platforms in IT, but around the data analytics. What are we going to do with all of this data that we should have or do have? And you will find that even companies like Apple are struggling with that. They have massive amounts of data in iTunes and their App Store, but their capacity to process that data and develop targeted, relevant offers that are continually updated for somebody is limited. So I think the race is on to figure out what to do with all that data and how to use all of that data to build a dynamic learning relationship with customers, where we're constantly updating what we know about them and we're constantly using that data to feed back more relevant and unique experiences for them in everything from the product to the customer experience with the frontline staff.